The scanner's red beam painted a thin line across dented cans and a bruised apple, turning each beep into a small confession of need. Tamsin Holt stood at Register 6 beneath a humming panel of tired fluorescents, palms raw from paper bags and cardboard, back aching in a way that felt older than 26. It was a Tuesday that nobody would ever frame, a sky the color of dishwater, a parking lot stitched with oil rainbows, a line of customers wearing the same expression of hunger hidden by budgeting. At the end of the conveyor, a man in a scuffed leather jacket shifted his weight like a tree trying not to creak in wind, the brim of his helmet tucked into the crook of his arm, his other hand lowering a discount loaf of bread with a care that made it sacred. "Evening," she said, letting the bagging rhythm steady her voice. She kept her tone soft. People on tightropes did better without loud noises. He nodded once. "Evening." The line shifted. A woman behind him thumbed a coupon book with a sigh. The receipt printer in Register 5 hiccuped and spat static, making Mario on the other register thump it like he was reviving a dead radio. Everything about the store seemed a little tired, except the oranges. Somehow they were always bright, a fluorescent advertisement for optimism. Tamsin rang the last item through. The numbers blinked up, then froze like frost. 1587, she said. He tucked a card into the reader like it was a secret he regretted telling. Processing. Processing. Declined. She saw it land in him, the way shame doesn't hit like a blow but like a seep, rising through the boards of a person until their shoes are wet, and they don't know when it started. He swallowed. Try it again. She did. Declined. He nodded to himself once, as if checking a mental weather report, and then began to slide items back along the belt. Take off the cereal. Keep the eggs. I'll get the rest next week. Tamsin felt the little rubber band around her heart tighten. Night classes had taught her how to measure dosages in milliliters and debt in monthly installments. The grocery taught her how to measure pride in ounces. There are weights heavier than a gallon of milk. "Hang on," she said, like she was just adjusting a bag. She pulled out her own battered wallet, the one with a laminating bubble over her library card and a crack by the corner where her student ID used to peek. She slid her card into the reader with the practiced speed of someone who did small rescues quietly. "Employee meal," she told the register. It wasn't, and she'd eat oatmeal again tonight, but the register didn't argue. He looked up, blue eyes unexpectedly shy. "You don't have to—" "I know," she said, meeting his gaze for exactly as long as dignity allowed. "It's okay." The receipt printed with a compliant whir. She tucked it between the egg carton and bread like a bookmark, then eased his groceries into a single bag so it wouldn't look like plenty. He took the bag with a careful grip. On his jacket, just under the collar, a patch read Rook in thread dulled by sun. He waited a second, searching for a place to put his thanks that wasn't embarrassing, and settled on a small nod that felt like a handshake two people decided to make with air. "Thank you," he said, low enough that it could have been to the machine. "Have a good night," she answered, which is what the script required and also what she meant. He left the helmet on his arm, no show, no thunder, and slipped out past the claw machine with the blue bear that never left. The automatic doors stuttered on their own schedule, then opened, then let him step into a gray evening that smelled like rain and hot brake pads. The woman with the coupon book moved up and tossed a stack of vouchers on the belt. "They let y'all do that?" she asked without looking up. "No," Tamsin said. "I did it anyway." The woman's shrug said everything about how rules work when everyone is tired. By the time the line thinned and her feet went numb in their discount sneakers, a shadow fell over Register 6. Mr. Greeley, manager by badge and by posture, held a clipboard like a shield.
His breath smelled faintly of coffee that had been forgotten and then remembered too late. "Tamsin," he said, "my office. A minute." The office was a cube of lost posters and found keys, its window made of the kind of glass that tried to be clear and achieved only judgment. He shut the door and did the thing with his eyebrows that meant he was practicing management. "You can't comp for customers. It's policy. If it's discovered on an audit, it's a write-up. You know this." "I paid for it," she said. "It wasn't a defense. It was a location." Mr. Greeley pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's not the point." "It's $15, she said, and swallowed the end of the sentence that wanted to explain moral math. "It's precedent," he corrected. He scratched a box on his clipboard like he was crossing out a small mercy. "I'm not docking you, but I am putting a note in your file. Next time, send them to customer service for food bank information." There wasn't time for a next time. He looked at her for 3 seconds too long, and she could see the tiny crack in his irritation where something like understanding had grown and then been sanded smooth by policy. "You're a good worker," he said finally. "Don't make me have to defend you." On her break, Tamsin sat on the back steps near the soda syrup boxes stacked like gray hearts and called the number that had been calling her. "Ms. Holt," the woman on the line chirped with professional brightness, sharp enough to cut. "This is Andrea with Brook and Vale Educational Services regarding your student loan account ending in 2784. We still haven't received your minimum payment for the month. As a reminder, your current balance is—" "I know the number," Tamsin said. She could see it behind her eyelids like a neon sign. $48,602.17. It had more personality than some of her coworkers. "Then you know our next step. We have been patient." "You and I have different clocks," Tamsin answered before she could stop herself. Silence. Then the script resumed. "If we don't receive $1,200 by Friday, we will begin wage garnishment proceedings. If you'd like to discuss income-driven, I'm already on the plan that lets me keep the light on." "Then you understand the urgency." "I do." She hung up before the final paragraph about caring for customers. She ate a granola bar beside the dumpster while heavy drops began to make a galaxy on the asphalt. When she finished, she tucked the wrapper in her pocket because the dumpster lid stuck like a bad habit, and she didn't feel like wrestling. She listened to the rain try to become more important and fail. The back door opened. Mario slid out a smoke under his apron. "Greeley mad?" he asked, forming smoke rings that looked like tired halos. "Greeley has a clipboard," she said. "That man sleeps with it, I swear." He glanced toward the lot. "That guy you helped? Nice bike. Old shovel. Had to kick it forever to get it on. Kind of thing hurts your hip when you're 40. "How do you know all this?" Mario shrugged. "My brother rides, knows a guy who knows a guy. They're not all what the news says. Some are exactly what the news says. It's like any family."
The rain deepened. The back lot smelled like wet cardboard and a story she hadn't been invited to. Tamsin went back in, tied her apron again, and practiced a smile that meant, "I see you," without promising more than change. In the last hour of her shift, the man came back. Not to the registers. He hovered near the end cap of pasta sauces, reading labels like prayers. She saw him from her periphery and looked away because sometimes the brave thing is to give people the shelter of not being watched. He came up when the store was nearly empty and placed 2 cans and a jar of tomato sauce on the belt. "I can cover these." He offered a folded 20 like a peace flag. "You covered them by coming back," she said. "We're square." He shook his head. "That's not how square works." He set the 20 by the keypad and nudged it with one calloused finger. "I won't sleep if I don't." She took it because some debts are not about math. "What's your name?" she asked, now that the air could hold such questions. "Rook," he said, and then, as if remembering something he owed to the day. Jace Mercer. People call me Rook. I'm Tamsin. She slid the bills into the till and imagined them going directly to the place in her bank app labeled loans, where numbers refused to travel backward. He nodded, kept his eyes on a point just past her shoulder. I'll be back, he said, not like a threat, and not like a promise, but something between, an intention turning into a plan. When she clocked out, the rain had become serious. The lot was a muted carnival of reflections. She pedaled her bike home because the bus only came at 17 and 47, and her timing had been born unlucky. On the uphill, her thighs burned in that severe, clarifying way that made the rest of life feel less like a sinking house. Her apartment was the kind good landlords describe as efficient. The water heater worked like a shy animal. You had to coax it with patience and luck. She showered, ate oatmeal with a chopped banana, watched the video of some woman organizing her pantry into labeled temples, and felt both soothed and removed from the species. Then pressed her student loan app open and closed like a bruise just to make the pain locatable. At 11:06, her phone lit again with a call she didn't need to read the contact for. She let it go to voicemail. The notification text read, "We can help you avoid collections." The word help felt like a salesman trying on sincerity. Sleep came in little pieces. She woke twice to the sound of motorcycles that were not real, and once to the sound of a motorcycle that was. She went to the window and tilted the blinds. Down on the street, under a cone of sickly yellow, sat a black bike idling beside a sidecar older than her father's radios. In the sidecar, what she'd first thought was a bundled jacket sat up. A small shape, a kid in a raincoat too big, hair stuck to his forehead. He looked at Rook, said something, laughed in a way that made the rain look optional. Rook tapped the kid's helmet brim and handed him a thermos. The boy drank like the heat itself was a story. Then the bike eased off, the sound a living thing that brushed the building's bricks, and moved on. Tamsin stepped back from the blinds, heart doing an internal thing, like realizing something has two answers. People contain more rooms than their doors suggest. She lay in the dark and pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum until the anxious skitter settled. Morning arrived with a sky that couldn't decide what it wanted. She put on jeans that remembered knees and a sweater that had been her mother's. On the counter sat the coffee she'd meant to brew yesterday and forgot. She drank it cold and decided that was a personality trait now. At work, Greeley didn't mention the write-up. He hovered around the office clutching the clipboard like life preservers, attended to by a flotilla of emails he read with his mouth. Mario handed her a pack of those cheap hand warmers hunters use. For the freezer aisles, your fingers go white like flags. Around noon, a woman in a navy blazer lingered by customer service, peering at employees' name tags the way a teacher checks seating charts. She walked up in heels that announced themselves and smiled in a way that didn't reach operational levels. "Are you Tamsin Holt?" "I am." "I'm Sylvie from Channel 8. We heard from a shopper about what you did last night. Would you be willing to talk? On camera?" She lifted one eyebrow as if cameras were flattery.
Tamsin felt heat crawl her neck. "No thanks." "It could help others donate," Sylvie offered. "Then you tell them to donate. They don't need my face for that." She tried to keep the irritation invisible. Kindness does worse when lit like a circus. The blazer faltered, surprised by resistance in an aisle that usually only stocked it in jars. "All right," she said. "If you change your mind." "I won't," Tamsin said, as politely as an exit sign. By the time her shift ended, the storm had decided to choreograph itself. Wind pushed shopping carts into soft collisions that sounded like a band warming up. A white delivery truck reversed, beeping its apologies. Tamsin unlocked her bike and felt the first real cold of the season needle the gap between glove and sleeve. She'd made it halfway home when her chain slipped. She coasted to the curb outside a pawn shop and one of those tax prep offices that only existed from January to April but never died. Then flipped the bike and set the chain again. The rain ran down her neck and found the back of her shirt. In her periphery, the roar of a motorcycle, that animal sound again. She looked up. The same black bike rolled to a stop beside her, engine puffing like a dog after a run. Rook flipped up his visor. The kid from the sidecar wasn't there now. Need a towel? He held one up from somewhere in the bike's depths, clean in a way that meant it had been reserved for someone. She hesitated because accepting things felt like taking too much. Then she took it anyway because shivering through pride was a waste of calories. Thanks. She wiped her hands. Chain slipped. I saw. He swung a boot over and crouched beside her bike like an offering. Up close, he smelled like rain and exhaust and something herbal that might have been a cheap bar of soap or the last of a good shampoo. He had a scar along his jaw that looked like a punctuation mark the writer regretted. You got lube? I have hope and a sponge at home. He grunted in what might have been a laugh. Hope's good, but oil's better. He dug in a saddlebag and produced a small squeeze bottle. He ran the chain slow and careful, as if he learned everything he knew about repair from things with pulses. Thank you, she said when he was done, and the words felt too light for the weight. She handed back the towel. He held her eyes for a second. You didn't want to be on TV. No. Good, he said. The world uses face as currency and then cashes it out fast. He tucked the towel back, tightened one last bolt with a quarter from his pocket, and stood. You saved me last night. I bought eggs? You saved me last night, he repeated, the echo doing something to the original. We'll see you around. He swung onto the bike in a motion that looked like a secret. The engine came alive. When he pulled away, he saw the back of his cut, the skull with wings that meant 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people. And above it, the word that made checkout clerks stiffen and news anchors choose adjectives. Hell's Angels. Her stomach dropped and then lifted. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition of the size of a thing. She watched the red of his brake light fade to a coin at the end of the block and then vanish like a promise folded small and pocketed. That night, the call from Brook and Vale came exactly at 8 o'clock as if the collector's day had an alarm labeled her. Tamsin let it go to voicemail again, then listened. Same voice, same script, same smile you could hear. She deleted it and then, out of a private superstition, took her change jar down from the top of the fridge and poured it onto the table. Stacks of quarters became hills. Nickels took on the dignity of effort. When she finished counting, she had $27.40 and a feeling you get when you clean a cut with peroxide. Sting disguised as goodness. On Wednesday after lunch, a rumor arrived before its subject. Mario leaned on her register like a newscaster with better ethics. There's bikes in the lot. A lot. How many is a lot? Enough to make Greeley rehearse speeches in the bathroom.
She wiped her hands on her apron. The thought of noise made her ribs tighten. What do they want? Mario shrugged. Sometimes clubs ride for donations. Sometimes they ride to say hi to each other very loudly. Sometimes they ride because riding is what keeps their ghosts busy. At 4, the doors sighed open as if bracing themselves, and 3 men in cuts walked in, not swaggering, just existing in space like they owned the physics. They split to different aisles like currents around a rock. One bought a bouquet of grocery store roses that looked like survival. Another bought a stack of those microwavable ramen cups college students write poetry about. The third stood at her register with a pack of AA batteries and a gallon of milk like he had been sent by an ordinary life. His name patch read Fox. The cut on his shoulder said he carried some kind of rank that mattered to the kind of world that didn't need job titles. You Tamsin? Fox asked. He had the friendly voice of someone who had learned how to lower the temperature when he walked into rooms that arrived hotter because of him. She nodded, the edges of her breath sharpening. Yes. Rook spoke about you, he said. Said you were square. He set down cash in exact change. We like square. I like people eating supper, she said, surprised by her own plainness. His eyes warmed. That too. He took his bag and tipped the brim of his non-existent hat in a gesture that had survived wars. Then he was gone in a soft weather of leather and rain. The parking lot filled with the slow architecture of a ride. Bikes idled in rows like notes on a staff. Strangers in patches bumped shoulders like cousins. A woman in a denim vest with a patch that read Susie Q laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes with the heel of her hand. A man whose beard could have been declared its own animal leaned against a post and ate a banana with reverence. Children pointed. 2 elderly men on a bench half smiled as if the past had just driven up to say it was fine. Greeley hovered near the entrance, looking like a homeowner watching fireworks from a porch with a garden hose. I called the non-emergency line, he told Tamsin, just to, do what you can't stop doing, she finished for him in her head, and nodded in real life. Okay. At dusk, when the sky committed to dark, the bikes left as tidal as they'd arrived. The lot became a place for cars again, ordinary sound reclaiming space. Tamsin finished counting down her drawer, slid the bills into the zipped bag, and handed it to Greeley, who took it like a fragile truth. By the bus stop, Rook stood alone, helmet on the seat beside him. He watched his breath make small ghosts. He didn't look up until she was almost beside him, and when he did, it was like a room warmed by a lamp. We're not here to scare you, boss, he said. You succeed at many things incidentally, she said. The joke came out easier than she expected. Are you okay? He nodded, looked toward the street like he could see something past traffic. My boy's with his mom tonight. Wednesdays she does late shift. Thursdays he's mine. He's 7. His name's Nash. He rolled the helmet with one hand, caught it with the other. He likes dinosaurs that don't exist and cereal we can't afford when I say yes to the wrong jobs. 7 is a big age, all front teeth and announcements. He announces everything. Yesterday, he announced he wants to be a marine biologist, a train driver, or a cloud. Aspirational range, she said. He looked at her then like something clicked. What did you want? Once, she asked, and surprised herself by answering. I wanted to design public parks that made old women feel safe and teenagers feel seen. Then I wanted to stop the ground from shifting under people who can't move. Now I want to get through the month without eating too much oatmeal. He nodded like that was a theology. Can I ask how much? She didn't pretend not to know what he meant. I think 48, and some change that changes nothing. He whistled low, an expression of respect more than shock. Then he looked up toward the slice of evening sky and said, okay, in a way that meant a gear had caught. Okay? She asked.
Tamsin could feel every camera phone in the store rise like a field of digital wheat. She wished them away, and couldn't. Rook's eyes found hers in the blur of faces, in noise and light, and made a small quiet she could stand in. We did a thing, he said, voice pitched for her and only her. 150 of us. Some near, some far. We don't agree on everything. We don't even agree on what we disagree on. But we agreed on this. You don't let someone carry a boulder alone when you've got that many backs. Her hand shook in a way that made her see herself from outside. The poor girl at the register crying because Hope had walked in wearing boots. She tightened her fingers around the edge of the conveyor and breathed from the bottom of her lungs where the stubborn lives. I can't accept money from strangers, she said, and heard how even virtue can sound like fear. We won't be strangers after today, Bishop said. He smiled once, fast, like lightning. And it's not charity. Some of us know exactly what it's like to be chased around a kitchen table by bills with teeth. He tapped the envelope. This is logistics. Fox tore the envelope cleanly and tipped it. Paper slid onto the counter. Not cash. Documents. Copies of a ledger with her name, account numbers, terms outlined in fonts that had moved into her dreams, a cashier's check folded inside like a blade dressed as a bookmark. She recognized the servicer's blue logo and felt her knees consider alternatives. "How did you—" she started. "Legally," Bishop said, "with phone calls and patience. You'd be amazed what a club can organize when it's not organizing trouble." Rook's mouth crooked into something like pride and apology at once. "We raised the money. We called the office. We asked what you could never get them to answer without being kept on hold long enough to learn 2 new hobbies. We asked how to satisfy the balance in full today." "Why?" she asked. Because questions sometimes hold tears back like sandbags. Rook's answer was for the whole room, but landed in the middle of her. "Because you saw me and didn't ask me to be somebody else first." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick rubber-banded stack of letters and notes, dog-eared, stamped, some smudged with fingerprints. He set the stack beside the documents. Mario coughed into his elbow in a way that meant, "I'm crying, but I smoke, so it's plausible." Nevaeh filmed from behind a column and whispered, "Oh my God," 3 times like she was practicing for church. Greeley touched the papers like they might make noise. "We can't. This should happen at a bank," he managed. "We tried that. They prefer rooms without fluorescent lights and the smell of dish soap. But the world happened here." He glanced at the store's brand of generosity, flyers for the food drive, a jar for a local coach's medical bills. "So we brought the bank here." Outside, the rumble of bikes idled like weather gathering. Inside, people looked at Tamsin like she might be asked to levitate. She thought of the app on her phone that turned her future into a pie chart and gave herself exactly 1 second to hate pie. Then she straightened, wiped her eyes with the heel of her palm, and nodded once. "Okay. If this is logistics, then let's be logistic." She swallowed. "What do you need from me?" "Your signature," Fox said, producing a pen like a magician pulling a dove from a sleeve. "And maybe a good word for us if anybody asks whether we're capable of anything besides noise." There was that smile again, quick and gone, shy around the edges. Bishop looked up at the security cameras as if addressing the store's false sky. "No pictures," he said mildly, and a few phones went down because even rebellion likes to be asked nicely by men who have had to be unkind elsewhere. He returned his gaze to Tamsin. "If you say no, we go. If you say yes, we'll walk with you until the last digit turns to 0. The last digit, the one that haunted the right side of her dreams. Tamsin reached for the paper and felt 1,000 Tuesdays in her bones, the dull ache of standing, the soft ache of saying yes, the iron ache of saying no and paying for it later. She looked at Rook and his jawline punctuation, at Bishop with miles in his voice, at Fox with quiet in his pockets. She looked at the bouquet of grocery store roses on the counter a few lanes over, at the banana peel stuffed into a pocket of a high-visibility vest, at the oranges refusing to be anything but bright. She picked up the pen. It was heavier than it should have been, club-branded, skull-winged, and absurd in a way that refused to apologize. Her hand hovered over the line where her name waited ready to become a past tense. She drew in a breath and held it until it asked to be let go. And then the automatic doors heaved open again, and a woman in a pencil skirt and a blazer the color of a legal pad strode in, flanked by 2 men whose necks had never read a poem. The blazer's badge swung, catching light. Brook and Vale Educational Services. Andrea, live. She had the smile from the phone, only bigger, and a folder so thick it looked like she'd come to litigate the weather. "Miss Holt," Andrea called, bright enough to make everyone blink. "We've been trying to reach you." She dipped her chin at the papers on the counter. "I see you've been busy." She smiled at Bishop and did not quite meet his eyes. "Sir."
Bishop's mouth was a straight line that could become any shape it needed to. "Ma'am?" Andrea slid a document from her folder with a motion that suggested she'd practiced it in a mirror. "I'm here to discuss the terms of any payment you may be considering accepting on your account. There are processes." She stressed the plural like a warning. Fox leaned against the counter, elbow casual, eyes not. "We like processes when they work." Rook shifted his weight, a mountain moving an inch. Tamsin steadied the pen over the paper and felt her heart redraw its borders. If someone asked, later, what she'd felt, she would say the sensation of being both small and exactly the size of her life. "You can discuss," Bishop said. "We came to do." Andrea's smile sharpened by a degree. "Well then, let's be precise. There are conditions to the acceptance of third-party funds. There are potential tax implications. There are—" "Ma'am," Tamsin said, not loudly, and Andrea paused because something in Tamsin's tone carried a different kind of authority than customer service ever trains. "I've read your emails for 3 years. I have bought the food you forgot to budget for me in your plans. I have taken the buses your due dates failed to recognize. I have learned how your holds work and the hours you are most tired and what happens if I press 2 and then 0. I know your conditions." I lifted the pen. "Please watch. Something is about to happen that will never be paperwork again." Andrea blinked in a way that said she had more paragraph, but would save it for a room without witnesses. The doors sighed again, and this time it wasn't people. It was sound. The kind that fills a space like an element. The rumble deepened as if the parking lot had become a throat clearing for an announcement. One by one, helmets turned toward the entrance like moons finding a planet. Bishop looked to Rook. Rook looked to Fox. Fox looked to Tamsin and nodded once, the way you nod to a diver poised over black water, ready when you are. She lowered the pen toward the line, and the power went out. The store did its small apocalypse. Fluorescence died with a sigh. Registers went mute. 1,000 little machines exhaled. The backup generator stuttered, failed, stuttered again, then caught. Emergency lights flicked on like unwilling stars. In the hush that followed, the only thing alive and sure was the howl of 150 engines waiting to be told whether they were thunder or company. Andrea looked up, voice recalibrating. "We'll need to restart." "Stop," Bishop said, not to her, but to the panic that had started to sniff around the edges of the room. "We finish what we start." Fox reached into the envelope and drew out a hard plastic box, snapped like a lunch pail, the kind couriers carry when air matters. He popped the latches, laid it on the counter beside the ledger, and the room leaned toward the reveal in the way all rooms do when hunger is about to meet its opposite. He lifted the lid, and Tamsin felt the sound change, the kind of quiet that has edges. People held their breath without being told. Rook's hand went still on the helmet he had been rolling. The lid rose another inch, and the world gathered itself around the moment like a fist closing around something burning. The box was full of revealing.
This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Revealing layered trays of the kind of logistics that make paper turn into outcome. On top lay a portable battery bank the size of a bread loaf, its indicator lights glowing like a small, obedient constellation. Beneath it, a compact hotspot blinked alive, already hunting signal. Next to that, in foam cutouts, sat a square thermal printer with a roll of slick white paper and a folder clipped with a brass fastener fat as a fist. Fox set the battery pack on the belt, clicked a cable in, and the little printer woke with a polite chirp that made the emergency lights seem theatrical instead of ominous. "Power's out," Andrea said, her smile pretending to be helpful while counting the liabilities in the room.
We really should postpone any— We brought our own daylight, Fox said, feeding paper into the machine with the same ease he'd brought into the store. We're not improvising, we prepared. Bishop nodded to the envelope, and Fox loosened the brass fastener. He lifted out the top document and angled it toward Tamsin. The servicer's logo sat in the corner in blue that had haunted her nights. Her heading read, Payoff Statement, good through today, 5 p.m. Her name in the next line. Her balance like a familiar enemy in a new font. Her throat constricted not from fear, but from recognition. There's a way a name looks on paper when it's about to be unhooked from something heavy. Andrea leaned in. Where did you get— By requesting it. With Ms. Holt's verbal authorization this morning and a follow-up call recorded by your own office. We followed your process. This is your number. Andrea's glance flicked from the page to Tamsin and back. The smile thinned but didn't break. Payoff statements expire. The exact amount must reflect accrued interest to the minute. If this payment is not received and posted by the time indicated, that's why we're here at 3:40, with a courier check drawn to your servicer for the payoff amount plus additional to cover any drift. Uncashed remainder returns to our issuing bank. We read your playbook. He slid another paper free. A cashier's check under clear sleeve, ink raised just enough to catch the emergency light. The numbers felt unreal, the way all real things do when they stand up on their hind legs in a fluorescent aisle. Tamsin's world narrowed to a tunnel with a counter at the end. She heard her own breath and the low animal patience of idling engines outside, the measure of 150 lungs exhaled in chrome. She thought, distantly, about how many Tuesdays lived in a number like that, how many hours of standing, how many bags lifted, how many apologies smiled. She thought of Nash announcing clouds as a career. She thought of her mother's sweater warming from her own heat. "Do I sign?" she asked, her voice steady because the part of her that shook had gone somewhere private. "Almost," Bishop said. "First we have the person who can put ink where it needs to go watch you say yes." He lifted a hand, and the woman in the denim vest with the laugh that made people reach for their own joy stepped forward, braids swinging, Susie Q stitched over her heart in white. "State-commissioned notary public," she said, opening a small zippered folio that had seen weather and duty. "Do you consent to third-party payoff and authorize Brook and Vale Educational Services to accept these funds on your behalf to satisfy the balance indicated for the account ending in 2784?
Andrea opened her mouth to object, then watched as Susie Q produced a stamp with the seal of a state whose motto had been written by someone with a sense of humor about rivers. "I do," Tamsin said. The words were not vows, and then they were. She could feel them land, small stones in a jar filling to a line she couldn't see but trusted. Susie Q's pen moved. The stamp thumped the paper with a sound like a gavel scaled to a kitchen table. "Sign here, here, and initial here," she said softly, the way people do when they understand that ceremony is just paperwork dressed for the occasion. Andrea tried for a pivot. "And you understand potential tax liabilities?" "Gifts are the problem of the person who gives," Bishop said mildly. "We are many. No one will choke." Fox placed the hotspot on the counter. Its bars climbed like a little miracle. The portable battery hummed steady. He paired a phone, tapped, waited. The printer spit a test strip. Bishop nodded once to Rook, and Rook pulled a low, battered stool from nowhere the way men like him always knew where useful things hid. He set it for Tamsin like she might be an old woman choosing a pew. She sat, the register conveyor still under her forearms like a river that finally intended to carry her somewhere different. She took the pen Fox offered. It had weight and a skull with wings on the clip, and if you'd asked her yesterday, she would have refused a future that required such ornament. Today, she accepted the absurd as simply the shape Grace had chosen.
She signed her name the way you sign when you decide to like your handwriting. The J of Holt, curve she'd always been embarrassed about because it looked like a teenager dreaming, narrowed into something confident. The pen moved like it had been waiting for this particular day to be a pen. Susie Q notarized. The printer chirped a confirmation. Fox dialed a number that was now muscle memory for him and astonishingly brought Andrea's own desk phone to vibrating in her bag. She blinked. Bishop gestured. She fished it out, cheeks flushing a fraction at being placed inside her own apparatus. "Brookenvale? Andrea speaking," she said into the phone out of habit before catching herself and turning to her. "It's, the payment department." She pressed speaker. A man's voice, professional and bored in the way that hides panic, came through tinned and familiar. "Brookenvale Payoffs, this is Kent." "Hello, Kent. You spoke to me this morning. You gave me the figure that appears on the payoff statement ending at 5 p.m. We are in a grocery store with your field agent. We have a cashier's check in hand for the amount plus buffer. We need your explicit verbal confirmation that upon receipt via courier drop in 20 minutes, you will mark the account paid in full and issue a satisfaction letter to Miss Holt." There was a pause as if Kent was flipping mental pages to find the script for grocery store payoff facilitated by an MC. He found professionalism. "If the instrument is legitimate and funds verified, yes, upon receipt we will apply the payment and close the account." "Put me on with collections as well," Bishop said. "They need to hear the same words." Another click. A new voice. "Collections? Mariah." "Mariah, this is Bishop. We'll be delivering a payoff check to your office in 20 minutes. We have your field agent here and the borrower. Please prepare to issue the zero balance letter and email a PDF to the borrower's address on file when funds clear. We will wait on the line." "That's, unusual," Mariah said. "It's also happening," Bishop replied. He let the silence sit. Outside, the idling rumble modulated, became softer, an obedience to the room. Andrea stood straighter, the thing she had built her days with, the comfort of being the power in the conversation, dissolving like sugar in a hot cup. She seemed smaller and more real. "Miss Holt," she said, quieter, "this will close the account. You're sure?" "I am sure," Tamsin said. She looked past Andrea for a breath at the oranges, still ridiculous in their insistence on brightness. "I am finished being a habitat for your numbers." "Copy," Kent said through the speaker. "We'll await the instrument." Bishop lifted a finger and a young man with a messenger bag stepped forward from the doorway like a calm animal. He had clean boots and the kind of face you trust with a sealed thing. Bishop placed the cashier's check and notarized authorizations into a rigid envelope, sealed it, and wrote in block letters across the front with a black marker that had known enough surfaces, "Brookenvale, urgent payoff." The messenger shouldered the bag. "Ride," Bishop said, not loudly. Outside, engines flared in a wave that rolled down the lot and into the street. The messenger slipped through the automatic doors as if the store and the story had opened a mouth just for him. 3 bikes detached from the idling sea and formed a protective V around him until he slid into a sedan with the hazard lights already blinking. The car pulled away with the obedience of a pencil line tracing a ruler. Inside, the room breathed. Greeley discovered a part of his collar that needed straightening and straightened it for a full minute. Mario had found a reason to wipe the counter with unnecessary care. Nevaeh's phone was down, bright screen pressed against her chest like a meadowlark. Rook stood beside Tamsin, but not too close. He flipped his helmet over and back in his hands the way men do when they need to move without moving away. "When this was me," he said quietly enough that it didn't disturb the fragile quiet, "someone put 20 on a counter and said, 'We'll see you around.' It was the first time in a year I felt like not a problem. You did that. You did that and didn't tell me who I needed to be to earn it first." "I didn't do very much," Tamsin said, and then heard the lie in it. She corrected herself with a softness she usually reserved for children and plants that would grow even if ignored. I did exactly enough.
Fox's phone buzzed. He lifted it, listened, nodded. Careers in the elevator. Another beat. The speakerphone crackled. Kent again, voice now attentive in the way people get when their job gets interesting enough to remember. Instrument received. Verifying. Stand by. The thermal printer on the counter began to hum of its own accord, co-opted by Fox's phone as if it knew it had a chance to make itself holy. A line of text appeared. Connection. Secure. Then, transfer. Initiated. Andrea folded her hands, thumb worrying knuckle. For the first time, she looked not like a system, but like a person whose rent came from enforcing one. Her voice, when she didn't have the big script to hold, carried curiosity and something that might someday become contrition. "Why did you do it here?" she asked, not to the room but to Bishop and Rook and Tamsin, the weird geometry of them, in a grocery store. "Because this is where she stood up for a stranger," Bishop said simply. "And because a lot of people are hungry for a different kind of news. Let them see something close in their own aisles." He looked to Tamsin, an almost smile like a weather event that chose to be gentle. "Because rooms remember what happens in them." The speaker sparked again, Mariah now, bright in the way of someone happy to be the bearer of a conclusion. "Funds cleared. Account ending 2784 is paid in full. Satisfaction letter will be emailed within 10 minutes and a paper copy mailed. Balance is 0. Please note tax considerations for it." Bishop thumbed the volume down a hair and looked to Tamsin. "Do you want to hear it? Out loud?" Tamsin nodded, throat a fist and a garden simultaneously. Mariah's voice grew again. "Balance is 0. She sounded pleased about saying it. Maybe she hadn't gotten to say it much. The room exhaled. Not a cheer yet, not applause, just the weight of a number evaporating from a person, and everyone in earshot feeling the air change pressure as it left. Rook put his helmet down and let his hands find his pockets, like men will when they need them to hold something back from spilling. Greeley clapped once, then again because humans do not know how to be alone in a moment once one person has chosen not to be. The room, freed, joined. And then it was a cheer. Not a stadium's roar, but the sound a neighborhood kitchen makes when a casserole comes out perfect and everybody who brought cheap beer realizes they brought the right thing after all. Phones lifted and lowered and were for a few seconds not the point. The emergency lights flickered and the main power returned with a collective breath from the fluorescence that felt like a wrong thing blessed. Registers rebooted with chirps. The oranges went back to being just oranges. The printer spit one last strip of paper. Fox tore it off and handed it to Tamsin. It read, "Balance, $0.00." The zeros looked like eyes opening. Andrea closed her folder. She looked at Tamsin with a nod that managed to be both professional and personal. "Congratulations," she said. And for once, the word didn't sound like a balloon. She turned to Bishop. "We'll process the remainder refund to your issuing bank. There's a small overage." Bishop tipped his head. "Buy your office a decent coffee with it? Or don't call someone at 8 p.m. one night this month?" Andrea almost smiled. "We have scripts. You also have choices," he said gently. She left in a spill of corporate perfume and legal pad yellow. The room softened in her absence, the way rooms do when the loudest color exits. Greeley sidled up to Tamsin, his clipboard and awkward shield turned into a donation plate. He cleared his throat. "I would like to apologize for the tone I used earlier this week. Policy is good for shelves.
People are not shelves.
Thank you, Tamsin said and meant it. The oranges are still perfect. He looked at the fruit wall like it had forgiven him. They are bright, he agreed, and departed, relieved at having done the right thing and anxious to stop before he did the wrong one. Mario wrapped her in the kind of hug that stops at the shoulders because anything more would break the thing it wants to honor. "Zero looks good on you," he whispered fiercely. "I'm calling my brother. He's going to cry like an honest man." Nevelia bounced on the balls of her feet. "Girl, the comments are going to be nicer than usual," she said, which in 2025 was a blessing you did not waste. Bishop looked toward the doors. Outside, the engines quieted like trained animals. He nodded to Fox, who nodded to Rook, who nodded to Tamsin as if the nod itself was a ribbon cutting. "May we escort you outside?" he asked. She hesitated. The idea of being walked through a corridor of thunder made her ribs rise like hills. But something else rose too, something she'd always saved for other people. She nodded. "Okay." They stepped toward the doors together, Bishop at a respectful distance on her left, Rook at her right, Fox a half-step behind like a sentence ended with competence. The automatic doors parted, the outside light coming in like a future. The lot held people and machines arranged as if someone had poured them from a height and they'd landed in meaning. Engines idled low, helmets tucked under arms like hats, faces lifted. The kind of silence men make when they want to be solemn but will never admit that's what they're doing, gathered over the asphalt like a good fog. Bishop raised a hand. "Family," he called, the word landing lightly and then sinking deep. "This is Tamsin. She bought supper. We returned the favor in the currency we had." He didn't say her last name. He didn't say the store. He didn't feed the internet. He did something older than all of that, which was introduce a person to a group and ask the group to remember her with their behavior. The cheer that went up was not wild. It was respectful, the sound roadmen make when they salute a fellow traveler's grit. The bikes revved once and the sound rolled over her without breaking anything. Rook leaned in. "It's okay to like this," he murmured, as if he'd read the rules she'd written for herself in a language nobody else spoke. She swallowed. "I like this," she said, and the saying made it true the way things become true when spoken plainly. Nash appeared between two bikes like a small fox exiting brush, raincoat hood down, hair a gravity-defying chaos of cowlicks and intent. He looked up, eyes the kind of blue that has not yet chosen a weather. "Hi," he said. He held something in both hands, serious as a mailman. "I made you a cloud." He opened his hands to reveal a cotton ball flattened into the shape of an honest attempt and taped to a popsicle stick. In marker, in letters that respected no baseline, he'd written, "Thank you, store lady." Tamsin crouched so her face was on his level. "This is perfect," she said, voice doing the thing voices do when they earn tears. "I am going to put it on my refrigerator next to a magnet that says, 'You are here,' and today that magnet will be right." Nash looked at his father with relief that his offering had not shamed him. Rook ruffled the cowlick. He Slatmy understood what this nod meant. To Rook, "This is my son, Nash," he said softly to her, proud, shy. "Marine biologist, train driver, Cloud." He blinked. Yes. Then he grinned the kind of grin that makes further weather redundant. Bishop stepped close enough to be heard without asking the day to carry his words far. "We're holding a food run on Saturday. We bring staples to the shelter on 9th. We don't do press, we don't do speeches. We lift and carry. If you wanted to choose the list, it would be correct." Tamsin looked from him to the store, to the rectangle of fluorescent day inside the doors where she counted change and smiled at strangers and practiced patience like an art.
Her schedule lived on the back of a cabinet door at home. Saturday was a blank square she usually filled with laundry and a book she read a chapter at a time because that's what the week gave her. Okay, I'll choose the list. No skimping on protein and dignity items. People don't stop needing shampoo because they need rice. Bishop's mouth made the almost smile again. Dignity items, he repeated, like learning a new route. Done. A rust-red SUV pulled up at the curb, back window covered in soccer ball decals, Mom at the wheel with a look that telegraphed curiosity and a promise not to get involved. She honked once, friendly. The world continued the way it always does when something extraordinary happens. It keeps going in all directions at once.
Rook cleared his throat, awkwardness visiting him in public like an old friend. "There's this tradition," he said. "We don't buy people bikes because that's a mess and a headline, but sometimes, when a person has carried heavy things long enough that their bones start taking notes, we help with something that makes those bones rest better." He nodded toward her bicycle, locked to the rack. "We could tune that up. New chain, tires that aren't counting down, good lights. We'd ask you to let us." "My chain has developed a personality," she said. "You'd be doing the city a favor." She hesitated, then added, braver now that Zero had washed something sharp out of her, "and maybe teach me how to fix it myself." Rook looked so pleased you would have thought she had offered him a title. "Yes," he said simply. "That part's the point." Fox checked his watch the way men do when they measure time in miles. "We've got 7 minutes to get the courier back to the lot," he said. "Then we clear out before the evening rush talks itself into thinking we're a parade." Bishop raised his voice the width of a notch. "Mount up," he called, and the lot moved like choreography taught by wind. Helmets on, leg over, engines becoming more than machines. He turned to Tamsin. "We won't come back in a way that makes your boss sweat, except Saturday. Saturday we left rice." "Saturday we left rice," she echoed, like a benediction invented in a grocery store. They left as they had come, controlled, like rivers leaving a floodplain politely. The lot went back to cars seeking spots close enough to make inconsiderate sense. The sky remembered itself and stopped threatening rain. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing with conviction. Life put its shoes back on. Inside, shifts changed. The intercom announced a cleanup in aisle 2 because a jar of pickles had decided to become a memory. Tamsin hung her apron in her locker and looked at the cheap plastic hook like it had watched a ceremony and had an opinion. In her bag, her phone vibrated. She thumbed it awake. An email from Brook and Vale glowed at the top. Subject: Satisfaction Letter, Holt, Tamsin. She opened it. The PDF's first line bore her name and the phrase, "Paid in full," in letters that normally lived in other people's mailboxes. She pressed the glass to her chest as if it cared about the warmth. Mario appeared in the doorway. "You going to the diner next door?" he asked, trying and failing to be casual. "I'm buying you pie with this week's cigarette money." "I don't like pie," she said automatically, then laughed because she did actually very much like pie and because jokes grow muscles after long hunger. "I like pie very much." The diner did what diners do. Poured coffee that tasted like persistence, served pie that tasted like holidays, let people sit in vinyl that remembered 1,000 conversations and didn't judge them all. Mario told her about his brother's kid who was building soapbox cars out of kitchen chairs. Nevaeh slid into the booth and showed them a video of a cat who had decided gravity was for other people. The bell over the door rang like it had a good opinion of the day. Rook and Nash came in with their helmets under their arms and their hair planned by the wind. They sat at the counter, ordered grilled cheeses with the seriousness of a negotiation. Nash swung his feet and practiced being loud, then remembered grocery store rules and chose to be medium. Rook turned halfway on his stool. "We'll get that tune-up done tomorrow," he said to Tamsin, "if you bring the bike to the lot after your shift. We're at the old cannery on 5th. Big doors, bad paint." "I know it. I ride past and always think the building looks like it would like someone to remember it had a purpose." "It does. It's where we keep the things we used to be useful." She took a bite of pie and, mid-apple, felt something unwind deep as tendon. It wasn't just the number, it was the way the number had been escorted out of her life, ceremoniously, and with witnesses, and with generosity that didn't ask for a receipt in return. It changed what other numbers could do to her. The next day came like a normal day, wearing a better shirt. Tamsin's body still knew all its eggs. The loan had never massaged her arches for her, and Zero would not either. But the ache had room now. She moved through the store with a different geometry. People noticed without knowing what they noticed. At 5:30, she unlocked her bike and pedaled to the cannery. The doors were as big and the paint as bad as promised. Inside, the air was a mix of oil and cold iron and the particular sweetness of sawdust. Bikes lined up like horses waiting their turn at a river. A radio played classic rock at a volume that let thought coexist. Fox handed her a rag that had started life as a hoodie. Rook hung her bike on a stand and spun the back wheel. It wobbled in confession. He adjusted spokes with a small wrench, each ping a syllable in a language she was learning to love.
"Press here," he said, guiding her hand to the chain. "Feel the slack? Too loose. It'll jump when you need it steady, like most things." He showed her how to slide the wheel, how to sight the line, how to tighten without over-tightening. He did not take over. He did not narrate her clumsiness. He made space. Nash swept the floor with a broom taller than him, humming something that had only one note and infinite commitment. He presented her a bolt he'd found, as if it were a coin minted by adventure. She put it in her pocket like a talisman. When they were done, the bike felt like a promise. Rook mounted his own and showed her a route home that avoided the bad corner with the blind turn and the pothole that had been trying to become a manhole cover for a decade. He rode beside her at a pace that respected lungs that had spent more time in checkout lanes than on hills. At her building, he put a foot down and said, "Saturday, 9." And she said, "Rice." And they both grinned at having a password. Saturday Sky arrived honest and clean. The club filled the lot with food that Thompson had put on the list that took into account the size of hands and the shame of needing help. Beans, rice, tuna, peanut butter, shelf-stable milk, diapers, pads, soap and bars because people without a place to keep bottles needed bars. A stack of simple birthday kits in gallon bags, cake mix, frosting, candles, because children still turned 8 even when money turned away. They loaded saddlebags and milk crates and a trailer that had seen more parades than it would admit. Bishop lifted boxes with the quiet efficiency that made leadership look like work instead of podium. Fox carried stacks on his shoulder because bodies trained by miles like to remember their training. Rook and Nash were a unit. Father handing to son, handing to whoever was next, and the chain never breaking. Greeley appeared in the distance like a deer, decided to be brave, and brought a pallet jack because logistics was his dialect even when he wasn't in charge. Mario and Nevea arrived with a sedan full of toilet paper, purchased with the phrase, "employee discount," returned to its intended use. The shelter on 9th had steps worn by a century of feet, and a woman named Perry who ran the place with a clipboard that had doodles of roses around the margins. She met the bikes as if strangers regularly arrived carrying grace and canvas. "We've had bands," she said, counting boxes. "We've had churches. We've had high school teams dressed as elves in July because nobody told them calendars are not costumes. We've never had you. We are very good at lifting, and we are trying to be better at other things." Perry nodded like she was a priest, and this was a confession shaped like rice. "You can carry to the pantry, then the family room." She looked at Thompson with that eye women have for other women who are newly out from under something heavy. "You made the list?" "I did," Thompson said, embarrassed by pride, and then deciding the sensation was one she should practice keeping. "Please tell me what I got wrong next time." Perry's laugh had corners. "You started with dignity. That's the part most people forget." They stacked, sorted, stocked. Nash placed a birthday kit on a low shelf with the care of a librarian and asked if the 8-year-olds could have 2 colors of frosting.
Perry said, "I decree it, with the authority of someone who has learned which rules are kept only by people who do not have to eat the outcomes." They built a pyramid of soap and resisted the urge to make it perfect, because perfection is not the point when people need to bathe. At the end, Perry gathered them with a clap that had mother in it. "There's stew," she said. "If you'll eat with us?" They did, around tables that had seen too many names carved into them and kept their sense of humor anyway. Rook and Thompson sat with a man whose hands had built houses until houses got too expensive to build, and now he folded laundry like a monk. Nash taught a little girl to make a brontosaurus out of a napkin. Bishop listened more than he spoke, and laughed at a joke told by a man who had learned to be funny to survive winter in a tent. After, in the alley behind the shelter, Rook leaned against a stack of pallets and looked at Thompson with something patient. "I need to say something, not because it changes anything, but because truth makes better air," he said. "The person who declined my card earlier that day wasn't the card. It was me not wanting to call my brother again and ask to borrow. It was me not wanting to call Nash's mom and pretend it was fine because my pride likes costumes. You let me keep the part of my pride that matters." She nodded because words would have spilled, and she had moved enough sacks for one morning. "Okay. Also," he added, grin returning like a bird, "Nash wants to invite you to the Science Museum. He says your cloud deserves to see the big clouds in the planetarium." "I would like that very much," she said, choosing yes on a scale that had heretofore been calibrated to scarcity. They rode back slow. The city felt bigger, not because it had grown, but because she had. The following week, Channel 8 ran a story anyway, because stories like this leak under doors. Sylvie's tone was softer than usual, less about the spectacle and more about the people who arrived not to be seen, but to see someone else. They blurred faces and kept patches out of frame. They said only, "A grocery clerk paid for a stranger's food." In return, 150 strangers paid off her student debt. Viewers argued in comments, as if the world demanded its sport, and then someone dropped a link to a food bank that needed volunteers, and the argument got smaller. Brooke and Vale sent 2 letters, one for the file cabinet, one that didn't know where to go yet because Tamsin didn't own a file cabinet but wanted to now. The envelope sat on her table like a small white animal that had wandered into her apartment and decided to stay. Sometimes she pet it with her palm without opening it because knowing what was inside was a kind of miracle that didn't require repetition. On a Tuesday very much like the one the story had begun on, a woman with a coupon book came through Tamsin's line, and as she fumbled, her card refused her in public, and her eyes did the thing everybody's eyes do when they're asked to prove their worth by a machine. Tamsin smiled, and without theater, did what she had always done. The difference now was how much room there was around the kindness. It didn't feel like choosing a stranger over herself anymore. It felt like the air had been adjusted, so choosing didn't require sacrifice that bled. At closing time, Greeley approached without clipboard. He held a single sheet of paper in 2 hands, the way people hold something delicate when they are not used to delicate. "There's an opening for assistant manager," he said. "It's not glamorous. It's more spreadsheets and less oranges. It's more dollars. I think you're already doing half of it. You'd be good at the other half." She looked at the paper and saw an old life aligning with a new one in not quite parallel lines. The schedule would push on her night classes in ways that would require a different pair of shoes for the part of her that still wanted parks safe for old women and seen by teenagers. She asked for a night to think, and meant it. He nodded, grateful for the reprieve from needing to be the boss of anyone's dream. That night she walked to the river, where the city's old bridges held themselves up out of habit, and the water was the same kind of patient as engines at idle. She thought about what it meant to lead in small rooms. She thought about dignity items. She thought about Nash's napkin dinosaur and Bishop's almost smiles and Fox's quiet. About Susie Q thumping a seal onto a page like a drum. About Andrea saying congratulations and sounding like she meant it, because sometimes the lines get blurry and people fall out of their roles into something human and better. She thought about the fact that her debt had not been forgiven by a system designed to do the forgiving. It had been paid by people designed to carry. When she woke the next morning, she knew what yes looked like. She went in early and found Greeley in the office making peace with a stapler. "I'll take it," she said, "but I'm keeping Register 6 on Wednesdays." He blinked. "Assistant managers don't usually run a register." "They should sometimes," she said. "Rooms remember what happens in them, and I need to remember why I'm counting." He nodded, humbled. "Okay." He held out his hand. They shook like people who both were and were not their jobs. On Wednesday, she stood again behind the stripe of red light and the little confessions it read. She knew now that when the line got long and the printer hiccuped and someone's card told a story in a language that drew blood, there was 150 engines worth of air behind her, a portable battery, a hotspot, a woman with a stamp, a field of oranges that refused to darken, a club that had decided to do better at other things. Rook stopped by near closing, helmet on his arm. Nash at his side with a new creation, this one labeled, in painstaking letters, Rainbow. "Nash wants to know," he said, pretending it was Nash's question and not also his, "if we can ride to the park on Saturday after the food run and look at the fountain because he thinks the fountain has a heartbeat." "It does," she said. "All fountains do. They just need someone to listen from close enough." They stood together under the humming lights while the night did its best impression of indifferent. It couldn't quite manage it. The city had learned their names. When Tamsin biked home, the chain whispered along the teats the way new things do when they settle into a task meant for them. She put Nash's newest cloud on her fridge beside the magnet and the letter and a photo Mario had insisted on printing where she looked like someone who had inherited a good porch. She brewed tea she'd been saving and drank it without saving it for anything else. Outside, somewhere, an engine turned over and became a traveling weather system. Inside, the zero on her screen kept being a zero. The number did not creep back the way cockroaches and bad habits do. It stayed put. It taught her a new thing about staying put. The world did not change in a way measurable by laws. It changed in the shape of a Wednesday that remembered how to be more than an obstacle. It changed in the way a manager softened, in the way a notary carried her stamp to places that hadn't earned ceremony and gave it anyway, in the way a club with a difficult name did something that a quieter name might have taken credit for. And on a night with good air and an honest moon, with Nash asleep and the city making sense in the small radius it could, Tamsin sat with her laptop and opened the page of the community college again, not to withdraw as she had planned to in the hour before zero, to enroll in the class that had terrified her because it dealt in naps and people and the kind of math you use when you want to shape how bodies move through parks without being afraid. She turned off the light. The apartment held the smell of tea and paper and quiet triumph. Her phone buzzed once on the counter, a text from an unknown number that she almost didn't tap. It said, "I don't know you. My husband's brother rides. He told me what happened. Today, I took the money I was going to spend on a dress and I bought diapers for a woman in my building instead. She cried, then laughed, then gave me a cookie that tasted like the kind of home we both want. Thank you for starting something that will not be a headline." Tamsin put the phone face down and put her forehead on her folded arms and let herself shake the way people do when nobody is watching and the day finally allows it. Then she laughed too, surprising her ceiling into a better opinion of humanity. The next morning, she wrote 3 words on an index card and stuck it to the inside of her locker, where only her fingers and her fear could read it when it needed to. Start with dignity. If anyone asked her later what the best part was, the ride, the check, the zeros, the roar, she would say it was the way a room changed when people decided to be on her side. How a machine that had said no to her 1,000 times said nothing at all, while the group of strangers made a new yes out of parts no one had cataloged properly yet. How when the numbers let go, there was more of her left than she expected. Enough to say yes to Saturdays, and fountains, and maps, and a boy's handcrafted weather. 0 did not make her miraculous. It made her accurate. She was exactly who she had been when she bought eggs for a stranger, only now she wasn't trying to do it with her lungs half full of someone else's ocean. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.